When your child looks you in the eye and says, "They held me down," something inside you breaks and reforms into something sharper. I wanted to scream to tear the whole house apart. But instead I asked her one question. "Do you want to report this?" And for the first time since it happened, she didn't cry. She didn't hesitate. She just nodded. What came next wasn't rage. It wasn't revenge. It was something colder, something clearer. Because when I saw what they did to her, on camera no less, I knew there was only one way forward, and it started with silence. The kind that speaks louder than any scream. It was supposed to be a normal Saturday, just another long hospital shift and a quick birthday drop-off. I kissed Zoe goodbye in the driveway that morning, the smell of her lavender hairspray still lingering in the air after she flitted out of the car. 16, confident, radiant. She looked older than I remembered the day before. Her curls were styled perfectly pinned back, with delicate pearls, the result of a salon appointment she'd begged me to book for weeks. And I had. I'd pulled double shifts, skipped my one massage in months, and handed over $120 because for once she wanted to feel beautiful, truly beautiful. She'd been excited about this party for days. Not because she particularly adored her cousin Paisley. Those two had always had a strange kind of silent competition. But because she wanted to show up feeling like her best self, she had wrapped a hand-painted journal as a gift, tied with glittery tape, tucked a note inside that said, "You shine brighter every year." It was sincere. That was Zoe. She had a way of offering love even when she wasn't sure she'd get it back. As she adjusted her dress in the car mirror, she asked, "Do you think Paisley will like my hair?" Her voice was hopeful, a little hesitant. "She'll love it," I told her with more conviction than I actually felt. Because here's the truth, I didn't want to admit, not even to myself, I wasn't completely at ease about her going. I told myself it was just motherly nerves, the usual protectiveness. But something in my gut was tight as I watched her walk toward that front door. I had grown up in that house. I knew every hallway, every creaky floorboard, every unspoken rule. And I also knew the invisible weight that came with walking in there looking a little too confident, a little too proud of yourself. Still, I drove away. I told myself it was fine. Because family, right? They might be complicated, but they were still her blood. And no one would ever do anything to hurt her. Not like that. Not the way I'd once been hurt. That was all in the past. The shift at the hospital was hectic. Flu season was picking up and the ER was packed. Between triaging patients and fielding calls from residents, I didn't have much time to check my phone. But every hour that passed without a text from Zoe made my chest feel a little tighter. Maybe she was just having fun. Maybe she was busy. Or maybe... No. I pushed the thought down. By the time I pulled into the driveway that evening, exhaustion had set in. But as I reached for the handle and glanced toward the house, something inside me stilled. The porch light was on. The door creaked open. And then Zoe stepped out. For a full second, I didn't recognize her. Her hair, her long, styled, meticulously curled hair, was gone. Not cut, not trimmed, gone. Hacked. Uneven tufts stuck out in jagged layers. One side barely grazed her ear. The other hung down to her chin like a cruel afterthought. It looked like someone had taken dull scissors and started chopping with no plan, no care, and no mercy. Zoe didn't say a word. She walked slowly, head down, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her shoulders were stiff, her steps small. And then she looked up at me. Tears. "Zoe," I called out, stepping out of the car, my voice barely above a whisper. What happened?" She opened her mouth trying to speak, but no sound came out. Her lips trembled. Then finally she managed a shaky whisper. "They cut it." That was all she could say before the sobs came. Loud, raw, soul-deep sobs that shattered something in me instantly. I ran to her, pulling her into my arms. She buried her face in my shoulder and cried like she was trying to hold herself together but didn't know how. I didn't ask who. I didn't need to. Not yet. The image of her walking toward me, broken and ashamed, was enough. Enough to know that this wasn't an accident. This wasn't just a bad haircut. This was deliberate. This was violence masked as discipline. Or worse, disguised as jealousy. She whispered again, softer this time. Grandma. And Aunt Victoria. That was it. The confirmation. And I swear something inside me shifted, froze, then shattered all at once. My mother, my sister, I should have known. I did know. Deep down, I had always known what they were capable of, but I wanted to believe that they wouldn't cross that line. Not with her. I wanted to scream, to storm into that house and rip it apart, but instead I knelt down next to Zoe and held her tighter. "Can we go home?" she asked, still trembling. "No," I said quietly. "Not yet." My voice didn't even sound like mine. It was calm, too calm. The kind of calm that comes right before a storm. We turned toward the house together, her hand gripping mine. My breath was steady. My steps were sure. Because that moment wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about hair. It was about the line they crossed. And they had no idea what was coming. Inside the car, Zoe's sobs had quieted to shaky breaths. She sat with her knees pulled to her chest, arms wrapped tightly around them, her face still blotchy from crying. The dim interior light cast soft shadows over what was left of her hair. I reached over to tuck a stray piece behind her ear, then stopped myself. There wasn't enough hair to tuck. My fingers curled back into my lap. I didn't know what to say. My mind raced with questions, but I didn't want to push her. Not yet. So I waited. After a long silence, Zoe whispered, "I told them no." My heart clenched. She didn't look at me, just stared out the windshield, her voice flat. "They asked me to tie my hair back." I said I didn't want to. Aunt Victoria said I was being difficult. Grandma told me not to make a scene. She took a deep breath. Then Aunt Victoria grabbed my arm and pushed me into a chair. The words came out in pieces like broken glass. I told them no again. Grandma said, "It's just hair." My jaw locked, but I kept my voice steady, and then Zoe swallowed hard. "They held me down." Aunt Victoria cut the back first. I felt it falling. I started crying and they laughed. Grandpa didn't even look up from his cake. Ezra was standing there with his tablet filming. Paisley told them to cut the front next so I'd look even more stupid. And they did. She finally turned to me, then her eyes bloodshot but fierce. They laughed, Mom. Like it was funny. There's a special kind of ache that lives in a mother's chest when her child tells her something no child should ever have to say. I clenched the steering wheel with both hands to stop them from shaking. Ezra filmed the whole thing I asked. She nodded. He said he was going to send it to the group chat. I blinked. What group chat? I don't know, she said quietly. I didn't ask. I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Zoe, I said softly, I'm so sorry. I wanted to be pretty, she murmured. I just wanted to feel good for one day. My vision blurred. I blinked back the tears because she didn't need me to cry. She needed me to listen, to stay grounded. You didn't do anything wrong, I said. None of this is your fault. She nodded once slowly, but I wasn't sure if she believed it. We sat there in silence again, the engine ticking in the cooling air. Outside the house, the porch light still glowed, casting long shadows across the lawn. Somewhere inside, my sister and my mother were probably laughing about it, still wiping frosting off counters like nothing had happened. Finally, Zoe asked, Can we just go? We will, I said. But first I want to ask them why. Her eyes widened, but she didn't argue. I got out of the car and helped her out gently. She moved stiffly, like each step cost her something. I kept my hand on her shoulder as we walked back toward the house, up the porch stairs, through the door that used to be mine. Inside, it smelled like cake and plastic tablecloths. The living room still held the faint noise of party cleanup, paper plates rustling, the occasional laugh from the kitchen. My mother stood by the counter, wiping it down. Victoria leaned against the sink, eating a piece of cake like nothing had happened. I stepped into the kitchen. What happened to my daughter's hair? My voice was calm, cold. Victoria didn't even flinch. We asked her to tie it back. She refused. So we cut it. I stared at her. You cut it. She was being dramatic, she added with a shrug. Honestly, she needed to be humbled. Margaret joined in casually as if discussing weather. We gave her a choice. She said no. So we taught her a lesson. My gaze snapped to her. You taught her? She's not a baby, Amelia Victoria said. She came in here flaunting herself. That fancy salon hair, the dress. What were you trying to do? Embarrass Paisley. Flaunting herself, I repeated slowly. Stunned, she made Paisley cry. Margaret said sharply. Do you know how that makes us feel? You always have to show off. Now your daughter's doing the same. The words hit me like a slap. I looked from one to the other, watching their faces twist with the same bitterness I'd known my entire life. It wasn't about the hair. It had never been about the hair. You did this because she looked beautiful, I said. Because she felt confident. Because you couldn't stand to see her shine. Victoria scoffed. Oh, please. But I wasn't finished. You didn't just cut her hair, I said, voice trembling with fury I tried to contain. You cut her dignity. You humiliated her. And you filmed it. They were quiet then. I'm taking her home, I said, already turning away. No one followed. No one apologized. Outside, Zoe was waiting by the car, her arms crossed. I walked straight to her and opened the door. As she climbed in, I glanced back at the house. And I knew that something had changed forever, not just for Zoe, but for me too. Because I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. And my daughter would never be treated like she didn't matter again. Not by them, not by anyone. Driving home that night with Zoe silent beside me, I couldn't stop the memories from flooding in. The past crept in like a fog, quiet but heavy, settling in my chest, my shoulders, my hands on the steering wheel. I'd spent years trying to forget, or at least trying to believe I'd moved past it. But sitting beside my daughter, her hair butchered by the same people who had once broken pieces of me, I realized I hadn't escaped. I'd just been granted a pause. When I was Zoe's age, everything was about Victoria. She was older by 2 years, taller, louder, more polished, and our parents adored her for it. Not overtly, they never said it outright, but you could feel it in 1,000 quiet ways. In how Margaret's eyes lit up when Victoria walked into a room, and how David made time to watch her volleyball games, but always had work when it was my turn on the debate team. I remember birthdays where Victoria got brand new outfits and I got hand-me-downs wrapped in fresh tissue paper. It's still in great condition, my mom would say, brushing off my disappointment. Let your sister wear the nice one. She's older. That was their go-to excuse for everything. She's older. She needs it more. She deserves it more. But it wasn't just the clothes. It was how they looked at her, and how they looked through me. Victoria wore makeup by 13. When I tried a little lip gloss at 15, I got a lecture about sending the wrong message. When I picked out a sundress I loved for a school picnic, Margaret wrinkled her nose and said, "Do you want boys to stare at you like that?" Meanwhile, Victoria wore off-shoulder tops and cutoffs and was called stylish. Once before a cousin's wedding, I found a dress that actually made me feel pretty. It was gray. Not flashy, not tight. But it fit well. I was 14. Victoria saw me in it and lost her mind. "Why are you trying to look better than me?" she snapped. "You know Brandon's going to be there." Brandon, her long-standing crush. I didn't even like him, hadn't given him a second thought. But because he'd once laughed at a joke I made, I became the enemy. She stormed off. That night I got pulled aside by my mom. "Couldn't you have worn something less bold?" she said disapprovingly. "Your sister was really upset. Bold. The dress was gray. It didn't end there." Victoria had this way of playing innocent. She'd accidentally lose my makeup bag or forget to tell me about a change in plans. One time she swapped my conditioner with shampoo and my hair puffed up so badly I wore a hoodie for 3 days. I didn't complain. There was no point. Margaret always defended her. "She's just teasing. Don't be so sensitive." But it was never teasing. It was calculated. It was always about putting me back in my place. And for a while I let it work. I stayed quiet. I stopped trying. I pulled back so much I barely recognized myself. I focused on school, on getting out. I told myself if I could just make it through high school, get into college, build a career, then maybe, just maybe, I'd finally be seen. So I did it. I worked harder than anyone else. Medical school residency, 24-hour shifts, endless exams. I built a life brick by brick with no help from anyone. I bought my first car without a co-signer, but signed the deed to my own house. Married a man who treated me like I mattered. And when I had Zoe, I swore things would be different. She would know she was loved. She would be celebrated for her kindness, her creativity, her sparkle. She would never be told to dim herself down so someone else could shine brighter. I let her pick her own clothes, wear glitter if she wanted, try new hairstyles. I watched her bloom into someone unafraid to take up space. But slowly I started to notice the looks. At family dinners, when Zoe would wear something a little bolder, nothing inappropriate, just expressive, Margaret would purse her lips the way she used to with me. "Don't you think that skirt's a little much for a girl her age?" she'd say, just loud enough for everyone to hear. Victoria would chime in with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Wow, Zoe, that's a lot of hair. Do you always wear makeup to school?" Zoe would look at me confused. "Hurt. It's just lip gloss," she'd whisper. And Paisley, sweet Paisley who used to play dolls with Zoe, started repeating her mother's tone. Once after a barbecue, I overheard her say, "You think you're so special just 'cause your mom lets you go to a salon." The way Zoe shrunk into herself afterward nearly broke me. Still, I didn't think they'd go this far. I thought I'd kept Zoe safe enough. I thought maybe, just maybe, my daughter wouldn't have to pay for the same family dynamics I once suffered under. I thought I had stopped the cycle. But I hadn't. They didn't change. They just shifted targets. And standing in that kitchen, watching my mother and sister justify humiliating my daughter in the exact ways they used to humiliate me, I realized this wasn't new. This was tradition. A toxic, poisoned tradition dressed up as discipline, as family, as tough love. It wasn't that they hated me. No, it was worse than that. They didn't think I mattered. They didn't think Zoe mattered either. That's when the fire started to build. Not the kind that makes you scream, but the kind that makes you plan. That cool, steady heat that pushes you to act, not out of rage, but out of resolve. Because if they had hoped to break Zoe the way they once broke me, they had underestimated 2 very important things. First, Zoe was stronger than they imagined. And second, I wasn't a powerless teenager anymore. I was her mother, and I was going to make sure she never felt invisible again. The house was silent after we returned. Zoe had gone straight to her room, still wearing the same hoodie from the party, still not saying much. She hadn't touched her dinner, just picked at the edges of her grilled cheese before quietly sliding the plate away. I stood at the sink, rinsing the dishes we didn't eat, and listened to the faint sound of her footsteps upstairs. There was a heaviness in the air, something beyond anger. It was like grief, but sharper. After I'd dried my hands, I walked up the stairs, my legs heavier with each step. I knocked gently on her door. "Come in," came a small voice. Zoe sat cross-legged on her bed, the hoodie's hood pulled halfway up over what was left of her hair. She didn't look up as I entered. Her fingers picked at a loose thread on the blanket. I sat beside her, careful not to crowd her. We stayed like that for a moment, quiet. I wanted to reach for her, but instead I asked softly, "Do you want to report this?" Her head lifted. "To who?" "The police," I said. What they did to you, it wasn't just mean. It was illegal. She blinked like she hadn't considered that. Really, I nodded. They touched your body without consent. They restrained you. They cut your hair while you were saying no. That's assault, Zoe. That's not just family drama, it's a crime. Her eyes dropped again, but I could see the way her breathing shifted like a gear had clicked into place. I felt like it, she whispered. That's because you were right. I waited a beat. We don't have to do anything if you don't want to. But if you do, if you want to tell someone officially, I'll take you right now. She didn't answer immediately. She kept pulling at the thread. I was about to speak again when she said clearly, "Yeah, let's do it." I nodded, trying not to cry. Okay. Then we'll need proof. Zoe tilted her head slightly. Ezra filmed the whole thing. My brows lifted. Are you sure he was right in front of me? He had his tablet up the whole time? Like it was some kind of YouTube prank. She said it flatly without bitterness, but the edge of disbelief was still there. That any of them had thought it was funny. You want to ask him for it? I asked. Zoe didn't even hesitate. She reached for her phone, scrolled quickly, and pulled up Ezra's contact. I leaned over just enough to see her text. Hey, Ezra. I know you filmed it. Can you send me the video? 30 seconds later, his reply pinged. Sure. Followed by a laughing face emoji and a video attachment. He didn't ask why. He didn't seem to think twice. Zoe stared at the message for a second, then looked up at me. You want to watch it? No part of me wanted to. But I had to. Yeah, I said. She tapped the file. It wasn't long, 12 seconds maybe, but it felt like hours. The clip opened with Zoe in the chair, her voice trembling. No, please no. Then Victoria's hand appeared, grabbing a thick section of her hair and yanking it back. Margaret stood behind them, arms crossed, like a supervisor overseeing a chore. David sat on the couch, completely unbothered, eating cake with a plastic fork. Ezra's voice giggled behind the camera. Paisley's rang out next. Do the front. Next. Zoe's shoulders shook as the scissors sliced through another section of hair. Then the screen went dark. I stared at the phone frozen. My throat burned. My stomach twisted into something hard and bitter. Zoe was watching me, but I didn't say anything right away. I wasn't sure I could. When I finally spoke, my voice was low, almost detached. They filmed it. They laughed. They treated it like entertainment. She nodded. Her face was unreadable. Can we go now? She asked. I didn't even change clothes. I grabbed my keys, my purse, and we walked out the door. Zoe still wore that same hoodie sleeves pulled past her hands. I still had yesterday's mascara smudged beneath my eyes. None of it mattered. We didn't speak on the drive. There was no need to. I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't screaming. I wasn't crying, but something inside me had locked into place. A quiet kind of fury. The kind you don't shout. The kind you sharpen. Because I had spent years learning how to keep the peace. How to keep quiet. How to excuse. But not anymore. They thought they could do this to my daughter and laugh about it. They thought silence would protect them. They forgot who I was. They forgot who she was. They forgot we weren't afraid anymore. And now we were done being quiet. The police station was quieter than I expected. No shouting, no slammed doors, just a low hum of printers, distant phones ringing, and the steady shuffle of paperwork. The fluorescent lights buzzed above us as Zoe and I sat in the lobby side by side on a cracked leather bench. She tapped her foot softly, not out of nerves, but like she was revving her engine. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't retreating. She was ready. The woman who came out to meet us wore a navy blazer and dark jeans. Practical haircut, no nonsense in her posture. She extended a hand and introduced herself as Detective Alvarez. Thank you both for coming in, she said. Her voice was calm, measured. Let's talk somewhere private. She led us into a small interview room. Plain walls, metal table, 2 chairs on one side, one on the other. She gestured for us to sit. Zoe didn't hesitate. Once we were settled, Alvarez flipped open a notepad and pulled a slim laptop from her bag. So she began. "I understand there's a video." I nodded and handed her my phone. Zoe had already forwarded it to me earlier that morning. I passed it across the table with a locked jaw. She plugged in headphones and opened the file without another word. We sat in silence while she watched. The seconds passed slow and sharp like cold drips from a leaking pipe. When she finished, she set the phone down and removed the headphones. Her expression had changed. Tighter now, her jaw firmer, her brows just slightly drawn in. "Okay," she said. "This is serious. You did the right thing coming in." Zoe didn't flinch. She met Alvarez's gaze head-on. "I'd like to ask a few questions if that's all right." The detective continued directing her attention to Zoe. She nodded. "Go ahead." Her voice was steady. No quiver. No fear. Just a quiet, iron resolve. "Can you walk me through what happened?" Alvarez asked. Zoe did. She told her everything. How they asked her to tie her hair back, how she said no, how her aunt forced her into the chair. How her grandmother stood by and gave the order. How Ezra filmed it, how Paisley egged them on, how they laughed while she cried. I watched her speak, watched the way she held her hands together to keep them still, the way her back stayed straight. 16 years old, and she told that story like someone who had decided the truth was more important than how it made her feel. Alvarez took notes, asked clarifying questions, never interrupted. When Zoe mentioned that her grandfather watched and said nothing, just kept eating cake, Alvarez gave the smallest nod like a mental box had been checked. "Have any of them contacted you since it happened?" she asked, next. Zoe glanced at me, then back. "No, not me. But they might have messaged my mom. I confirmed it. Margaret called. Victoria left a voicemail. Nothing helpful." "Okay," Alvarez said. "We'll want copies of those later if possible." She reached into a folder and pulled out a document. "This is a formal incident report. I'll file it today. From here, we'll open an investigation. There'll be interviews and we'll assign a child advocate to sit in on Zoe's next statement. If charges are filed, you'll be contacted immediately." I nodded. My heart felt like it had been holding its breath for days. Now it was starting to exhale. Alvarez looked at Zoe. "You did the right thing. That kind of behavior, no matter who it comes from, isn't okay. We take it seriously." Zoe gave the smallest nod. "Thank you." There was no triumph in her face, no relief, just clarity. When we stood to leave, Alvarez handed Zoe a card. "If anything changes or if they reach out in any way, you call me directly. This is your case. Your voice matters here." Zoe slipped the card into her hoodie pocket. "Okay." We walked out of the station into the sharp morning light. The clouds had lifted the sky pale and open. The air smelled of damp asphalt and fresh beginnings. I unlocked the car, and Zoe slid in quietly. For the first time in days, her shoulders didn't look so heavy. In the driver's seat, I buckled up and sat back, just staring at the steering wheel for a moment. "You all right?" I asked her. She didn't answer right away. Then softly, "I'm mad." "But it's a different kind of mad." "What kind?" I asked. "The kind that makes me feel strong," she said. I smiled, even though my eyes stung. "That's the best kind." As I started the engine, I looked at her out of the corner of my eye. She was staring out the window, but her reflection in the glass looked taller somehow. I had walked her into a nightmare without realizing it, but now she was walking herself out. And I was walking beside her. The thing about silence is that it doesn't always mean weakness. Sometimes silence is focus. Sometimes it's precision. We weren't finished. Not by a long shot. But we had started, and this time we weren't going to stop until they heard every word. The phone rang the next morning just as I was pouring my first cup of coffee. I didn't recognize the number, but I didn't need to. Some things don't require names to feel familiar. I let it ring once more before answering. Amelia! My mother's voice barked through the receiver before I could say hello. Are you insane? I didn't respond. I stirred my coffee slowly, grounding myself in the act. You actually went to the police, she spat. Over hair. Do you have any idea what you've done? I lifted the mug to my lips, took a sip, and waited. You've ruined everything. She continued, her voice rising with each word. You're going to destroy this family. Is that what you want? I let her rant. I let her pour out her fear disguised as fury, her guilt dressed up as outrage. And when she finally paused to breathe, I spoke. You should have thought about that before you assaulted my daughter. The silence on the other end was deafening. We didn't assault anyone, she said after a beat. It was a haircut. No, I replied. It was humiliation. It was control. And now it's evidence. You're not thinking clearly, she snapped. You need to calm down. I exhaled, slow and steady. Tell that to the detective. And then I hung up. I stood there for a moment, phone still in hand, feeling the tension finally break like a storm rolling past. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilt after a conversation with my mother. I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like I owed her an explanation. I felt done. An hour later, the phone rang again. I almost didn't answer, but the caller ID said, Victoria. I pressed decline, but she called back immediately. On the third ring, I picked up. What the hell is wrong with you? Her voice was tight, panicked. You actually pressed charges. I didn't press anything I said. I reported what you did. The rest is on you. CPS showed up at our house this morning, Amelia. They went through Paisley's room. They asked about scissors. They asked about my parenting. I said nothing. Stirred my coffee again. You did this? She hissed. You're tearing the family apart. I could lose my kids. You should have thought about that before you held mine down, I replied. Before you cut her hair and laughed while she cried. She tried to switch tactics, her voice wobbling. Look, maybe we got carried away, but you're making this into something it's not. I'm not making anything, I said calmly. I'm just not pretending anymore. You're really doing this? She asked, incredulous. You're going to let this go public? I haven't even started, I said. But trust me, I will if I have to. The line went quiet again. I didn't think you'd go this far, she said finally quietly. Then, that's the problem, I answered. You never thought I'd go anywhere. You assumed I'd always keep the peace while you kept the power. Another pause. So that's it. You're just cutting us off. I'm protecting my daughter. You're choosing her over your own blood. I laughed once short and dry. Yes, every single time. And then without another word, I ended the call. I didn't wait for her to call again. I blocked the number. Then I blocked my parents' numbers too. I deleted the group chat we all used to share. I removed myself from the Facebook family thread, turned off notifications, closed every digital window they could crawl through. That afternoon, I sat with Zoe in the living room while she did homework. I scrolled through my contact list, deleting names one by one, not out of spite, but out of necessity. I wasn't keeping space for people who had hurt her. I wasn't leaving a door cracked for apologies that would never come. Zoe looked up once, noticing. You okay? Yeah, I said. Just cleaning house. She nodded like she understood exactly what that meant. Later that night, she showed me a photo she found on social media. One of Paisley's friends had posted it. It was from the party. Before everything. Zoe standing by the cake table, smiling, her hair still in curls, her gift bag still in hand. She stared at the image for a long time, then handed me the phone. That was the last moment I thought they loved me. I swallowed hard. They don't get to define love anymore, I said. Not for you. Not for me. She nodded and leaned her head on my shoulder. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. But it was honest. And sometimes that's how healing begins. Not with noise, but with clarity. I used to believe that keeping family meant tolerating pain, that love meant forgiving everything. But I've learned something else now. Sometimes love is fierce, sometimes it sets boundaries, sometimes it walks away. And sometimes the most radical thing you can do as a daughter is become the mother you never had. It started with a screenshot. A friend from high school sent it to me with the caption, "Thought you'd want to see this." I hadn't spoken to her in years, but some bonds get silently reactivated when justice is at stake. It was a Facebook post from Victoria. The photo was of Zoe, her back to the camera, her newly butchered hair barely visible. The caption read, "She asked for a makeover and we gave her one. Amelia is blowing this way out of proportion like she always does. Just another cry for attention." Underneath were a flood of comments from people who clearly had no idea what had really happened. "She's always been dramatic. Sounds like typical teenage rebellion. I've known Amelia for years. She always makes everything about her." I stared at the screen, the blood in my ears drowning out everything else. It wasn't just the lies. It was how easily they were believed. How quickly strangers were willing to explain away the cruelty, to shift the blame to gaslight on behalf of people they barely knew. I showed the post to Zoe not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I believed she deserved the truth, even when it was ugly. She read the caption, scrolled through the comments, and said nothing for a long time. Then her mouth tightened into a thin, sharp line. "They're lying," she said softly. I nodded. "They're getting away with it." I looked at her. "Not if we tell the truth." She glanced up. "Would you be okay if I posted the video?" Her voice wasn't hesitant. It was clear, steady. "Are you sure?" I asked. She nodded. "They need to see what really happened." So I did. No dramatic caption, no long paragraph, no hashtags or finger pointing, just the video. I uploaded the 12-second clip with a single sentence, "This is what they call a game." Within the first hour, it had 200 views. Within 3, over 1,000. People watched Zoe cry, watched Victoria grab her hair, watched Margaret cross her arms and say nothing. Watched Ezra laugh and Paisley shout. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was loaded. The comments shifted. They weren't attacking me anymore. They weren't debating whether Zoe was too sensitive or whether I was overreacting. They were stunned, outraged, devastated. This is horrifying. I take back everything I said before. I'm so sorry. Why is that boy laughing while she's crying? This isn't discipline. This is abuse. I hope you press charges. I'd do the same for my daughter. Even the original commenters, the ones who had doubted, dismissed, defended, started deleting their posts. Some messaged me directly apologizing. Others posted public retractions. Funny how fast moral clarity shows up when there's video. By the end of the day, it had over 10,000 views. Zoe sat beside me on the couch, her knees tucked under her, watching the numbers climb. She wasn't smiling in celebration, but she did exhale like something heavy had finally been lifted off her. "I'm not invisible anymore," she said. I reached over and squeezed her hand. Later that evening, my inbox began filling with messages from other parents. People I barely knew, parents from school, women from the community center, even one of Zoe's old teachers. All of them writing to say they had seen it, that they were appalled, that they were behind us. "I never liked the way Victoria talked about you," one mom wrote. "My daughter has been friends with Paisley for years, and now I see where the meanness comes from," said another. One local journalist even reached out asking for a statement. I declined. We weren't doing this for exposure. We were doing this for clarity, for truth. For every girl who's ever been told to sit down and smile while someone breaks her. The next morning, Victoria texted me, "What the hell, Amelia? You posted that you're really dragging this into public now." I didn't answer. She sent another, "You made me look like a monster. You edited it to make it seem worse than it was." Again, I said nothing. Because here's the truth, I didn't need to defend myself anymore. The video spoke for itself. The lies didn't work anymore. The spin was useless. They had controlled the story for too long, twisted the truth into whatever made them feel better. But now the narrative wasn't in their hands. It was in Zoe's. By noon, someone had shared the video in a local parenting group. By evening, it had reached several child advocacy circles online. I got an email from a women's rights organization asking if we needed legal support. I declined for now, but I kept the offer. The ripple effects were real. At school, Zoe told me teachers were treating her differently, not with pity, but with respect. Other students came up to her in the hallway to say they believed her, that what happened to her wasn't okay, that they had her back. It didn't erase the pain. But it shifted the weight. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was someone who stood up, and the world had noticed. That night, as I sat in bed scrolling through messages, Zoe knocked on my door. She came in quietly, her eyes a little brighter than before. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not letting it go." I pulled back the covers and patted the spot beside me. She climbed in and leaned her head against my shoulder. "You didn't let them tell my story for me," she said. I wrapped my arm around her. "No, sweetheart. And I never will." They tried to shame her into silence, but in the end her voice echoed louder than their lies. And that, more than anything, is what justice looks like. The salon was tucked between a florist and a small yoga studio nestled in one of those cozy downtown strips that looked like it hadn't changed in 20 years. But inside, everything gleamed. Soft lighting, pale wood floors, the kind of calm, inviting atmosphere that smelled faintly of lavender and eucalyptus instead of bleach and hairspray. The chairs were plush, the mirrors framed in gold, and the music playing overhead was mellow and steady, like a heartbeat at rest. Zoe stood just inside the door, hesitant. She clutched the sleeves of her hoodie, half hiding behind me. I could tell she was nervous, not just about the haircut, but about being seen, about sitting in that chair and having someone else see what had been done to her. I gently placed my hand on her back and gave her a soft nudge forward. A woman appeared from the back. She looked to be in her late 30s, hair buzzed short on one side, dyed a stunning shade of midnight blue on the other. Tattoos peeked from beneath the sleeves of her black smock, and she wore a warm smile that reached her eyes. "You must be Zoe," she said, her voice calm and reassuring. Zoe gave a tiny nod. "I'm Camille," the woman said, crouching just slightly to meet her at eye level. "And I want you to know right now, we're not here to fix anything. We're here to make something new, something that belongs to you." Zoe blinked, surprised. "Not fix it?" Camille shook her head. "Nope. This isn't about undoing what they did. It's about taking back what's yours." I watched the tension ease from Zoe's shoulders just a little. Camille led her over to a chair near the back, away from the big front windows. A private spot. Safe. Zoe took off her hoodie, revealing the uneven tufts, the jagged ends, the patches of hair that had been mercilessly hacked off. Camille didn't flinch. She didn't gasp or coo with pity. She simply ran her fingers gently through the mess and nodded. "We can work with this," she said. "But first, tell me what you want to feel when you look in the mirror." Zoe tilted her head. "Feel... yeah, not look like... feel like..." Zoe was quiet for a moment. Then she said, strong. "Not embarrassed. Like I did this on purpose." Camille smiled. "I can do that." She turned to me. "Give us about an hour." I nodded and moved to the waiting area, but I kept stealing glances. I watched as Camille washed Zoe's hair gently, carefully, like handling something sacred. I watched them talk quietly. Zoe starting to gesture with her hands, her voice growing more animated. I didn't need to hear what they were saying. I could see it in her eyes. Something was shifting. An hour passed. Maybe more. When Camille called me over, I walked slowly, unsure what to expect. Zoe was sitting upright, legs crossed, her hands in her lap. Her hair was now shaped into a soft, layered bob, textured in a way that looked effortless and cool. A few strands framed her face, which somehow looked older, more defined. She looked at me in the mirror, then at herself again. "Well?" Camille asked. Zoe took a deep breath, reached up and tucked a piece of hair behind her ear. "I look awesome," Camille chuckled. "You do." I stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You look like you—" Zoe grinned. Not a full, carefree grin, but something quieter, something earned. Camille handed her a small mirror so she could see the back. "No gaps, no jagged lines, just yours." Zoe studied the reflection, then looked down for a moment. "Thank you. You did all the work," Camille said. At the front counter, I paid without blinking. Whatever the number was, it was worth every cent. Before we left, Camille handed Zoe a tiny business card with her number on the back. "If anyone ever messes with your hair again, you call me. I'll make sure you walk out of here feeling like yourself again." Zoe slipped the card into her pocket like it was something precious. As we stepped outside, the afternoon sun hit her face, and her new haircut glinted with it. She didn't pull the hood up. She didn't shrink behind me. She walked ahead. Her chin lifted. We stopped at a nearby cafe for iced tea. Sitting at a patio table, she tapped the straw against her cup and asked, "Do you think they've seen the video?" I nodded. "I'm sure of it." She didn't ask what they said. She didn't care. "I don't want to be angry forever," she said suddenly. "You won't be." I told her, "Anger doesn't last. But your strength, that stays." She stirred her drink. "It still hurts." "I know," I said, "but hurting doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're healing." She nodded slowly. "This haircut, it doesn't feel like theirs anymore." "It isn't," I said. "It's yours now." And she believed me. That was the miracle. Not the haircut, not the tea, not even the justice that was starting to unfold around us. It was that she believed me, that she believed in herself, that she knew beyond doubt that the story didn't end with what they did to her. It was only just beginning, with what she chose to do next. The second time we walked into the station, it felt different. Zoe wasn't clutching her sleeves. She wasn't shrinking into her hoodie or avoiding eye contact. She walked with a quiet calm. Her shoulders squared her haircut sharp and clean. It wasn't just her appearance that had changed. It was something in the way she moved, like she had stepped fully into her own skin. Detective Alvarez greeted us at the front with the same steady professionalism, but this time there was something softer in her tone. "Good to see you again, Zoe," she said. Zoe nodded politely. "You too." We were led into a larger room this time. A child advocate. A woman named Monica sat on one side with a legal pad and a warm smile. A small microphone was clipped to the table, and Alvarez explained that the interview would be recorded for the case file. Zoe listened carefully, then nodded once. "I'm ready," she said. They began with basic questions. Her full name, age, school, the date of the incident. She answered without hesitation. Her voice was steady, her eyes focused. When Alvarez asked her to describe the events again, Zoe did so with remarkable clarity. She didn't stumble. She didn't look at me for help. She spoke like someone who had spent the past week not just reliving a trauma but processing it, defining it and choosing what to do with it. She told them how Victoria had forced her into the chair, how Margaret had stood by, how Ezra filmed it and laughed, how Paisley had encouraged it, how no one stopped it, how they all seemed to think it was acceptable to hold down a crying teenage girl and cut her hair without consent. She spoke without bitterness, but without apology either. Just the truth. And then came the question I'd been waiting for. One I didn't know was coming, but felt it in my bones the moment Alvarez asked it. "Zoe," she said gently, "can you tell us why you decided to report this?" Zoe paused for just a second. Not because she didn't know the answer, but because she wanted to get it right. Because I deserve to be protected, she said. The room went still. Because no one gets to hurt me just because we're related. Because people need to know that it's not okay even if it's your grandma. Even if it's your aunt. It's still wrong. Alvarez didn't say anything. She just nodded and kept writing. Monica gave a small, approving smile. I sat there with my hands clasped in my lap, watching my daughter speak with more confidence than some adults I knew. My heart ached, but not from pain. From pride. This wasn't the same girl who walked out of that house with her spirit crushed. This was someone new. Someone who had chosen to speak, to stand, to reclaim her voice in a world that too often tells girls like her to stay quiet. When the questions ended, Alvarez closed her notebook and said, "You were incredibly brave today, Zoe. And your statement helps us move forward." "Thank you for being honest." Zoe nodded. "You're welcome." As we left the room, Monica handed Zoe a card with a hotline and a note of encouragement scribbled on the back. "You ever need anything," she said, "don't hesitate." Zoe tucked it into her phone case. We walked back to the car in silence. The air was crisp and bright, the kind of weather that wakes you up from the inside out. I opened the door for her and she climbed in without a word. As I got in on my side, I glanced over. "How do you feel?" I asked. She thought about it. "Like I'm not carrying it alone anymore." I nodded. "You aren't." She turned to look out the window. "It still makes me mad. It should. But I'm not scared anymore," she added. And that more than anything mattered. We stopped for lunch at a small diner on the way home. She ordered pancakes and hot chocolate. I got coffee. We didn't talk about the case or the investigation or what would happen next. We just talked. About school. About her favorite books. About a song she liked. About nothing. Halfway through her second pancake, she said, "I think I want to write about it someday. Not the whole thing, just what it felt like. So people know. I think that's a beautiful idea," I said. She looked at me and smiled. "Thanks for not making me stay quiet." I wouldn't know how I replied. "You were never meant to be quiet." On the way home, the sun dipped behind the clouds, casting long rays across the windshield. I reached over and gently took her hand. She squeezed back. She didn't need saving anymore. She needed space. She needed choice. And now she had both. She wasn't the girl they tried to silence. She was the girl who walked into a police station and said, "This happened, and it's not okay." She was the girl who answered a hard question with the simplest, clearest truth of all, "Because I deserve to be protected." The courthouse was quiet the day the judgment came down. There was no dramatic moment, no gavel slamming, no handcuffs clicking shut. It wasn't the kind of justice you saw in movies, but it was justice all the same. Victoria, David, and Margaret were all found guilty of misdemeanor assault. They each received fines, community service, mandatory parenting classes in Victoria's case, and most importantly, they were marked, not with physical punishment, but with the truth, with a record that followed them, a legal acknowledgement that what they had done was not just cruel, but criminal. Victoria tried to downplay it, of course, claimed she was misunderstood, told anyone who would listen that she was being unfairly punished for a family matter, but CPS didn't buy it. They assigned a caseworker to monitor her household for a year. Unannounced visits, check-ins at school, counseling for Paisley, limits on unsupervised contact with other minors. I heard through someone else that Tyler was furious, that he hadn't known the full extent of what happened until the video surfaced, that he'd pulled away from her in ways she didn't expect. Emotionally, physically, maybe permanently. Their vacation was canceled, their reputation in the neighborhood shattered. But none of that gave me pleasure. It didn't matter to me if their lives were inconvenienced. What mattered was that, for once, accountability had arrived, not as vengeance, but as clarity. Zoe didn't ask for updates. She didn't care about the verdict. What she cared about was freedom. One evening, a few weeks after everything settled, I sat with her on the back porch. The sun was setting, streaking the sky in soft orange and gold. We shared a blanket and a bowl of popcorn, listening to the crickets stir in the bushes. I turned to her gently. I just wanted to check in. About everything. Is there anything you need? She was quiet for a moment, then said, I don't want to see them again. Her voice was calm, not angry, not shaken, just sure. I don't want to talk to them. I don't want to pretend it was a misunderstanding. I don't want to hear how they didn't mean it. They did. And I'm done. I nodded. Okay, you're not going to make me, she asked, not accusingly but cautiously, like part of her still worried that being heard came with a catch. Never, I said, you get to choose. From now on, you decide who belongs in your life. She nodded, pulled the blanket tighter around herself, and stared out at the fading light. I thought back to my own childhood, to how I'd been told to keep the peace, to forgive without apology, to accept that some people just acted that way. And I remembered how much I had longed for someone to stand between me and the pain, someone who would say no. You don't have to keep walking into that fire just because you were born near it. And now sitting next to Zoe, I realized I had become that person. We went on with our lives, slowly, steadily. There were small milestones that marked our healing. Zoe joined an after-school art club. She started drawing again, something she hadn't done in months. One day, I found a sketchbook left on the kitchen table. The first page was a self-portrait. Not perfectly drawn, not technically impressive, but powerful. Her new haircut, her chin lifted, eyes focused. Above it, she had written one sentence in black ink, I am mine. We never returned to family holidays. We didn't attend the annual barbecue. The invitations stopped coming anyway. Some people in the extended family tried to mediate, tried to play both sides. I didn't engage. I wasn't interested in debate. My silence wasn't passive. It was intentional. One afternoon, my father texted, just one line. Your rent transfer didn't come through this month. I stared at the message, then replied, no issue. I'm just not funding people who laughed while my daughter cried. He answered, you're really cutting us off over a haircut. I didn't respond, because it wasn't about a haircut. It was about the message underneath, the belief that she didn't matter, that her body was not her own, that family meant ownership, not protection. It was about the moment they looked at her vulnerable and terrified and chose to keep going anyway. And it was about choosing her now, choosing her every time. Some nights I still caught myself staring at her when she wasn't looking, watching her laugh at a show or tie her shoes or braid her new hair with practiced ease, and I'd feel it again, that swell of fierce, gut-deep love. Not because she had survived, but because she had grown, because she had chosen to rise. She never said she forgave them. I never asked her to. Forgiveness isn't something you owe. It's something you own. And sometimes the most healing thing you can do is stop looking back. As the months passed, the case faded from public memory. The video stopped circulating. New scandals, new stories took its place. But for us, it had marked a beginning, not an ending, a reset, a decision. Zoe learned that her voice was powerful. I learned that mine still mattered. And together we built something stronger than tradition or blood. We built safety. We built truth. We built a home where no one ever had to shrink to belong, and that above everything else is what I will always fight to protect. If you've ever been made to feel small by the very people who were supposed to protect you, then you understand the courage it takes to stand up and say, enough. This wasn't just a story about a haircut. It was about reclaiming dignity, setting boundaries, and breaking cycles that should have been broken long ago. Have you ever had to choose between peace and truth, between keeping the family together and protecting yourself or someone you love? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if this story moved you, please don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. Because sometimes the quietest voices carry the loudest truths.